Welcome, and we are thrilled to host this year's Ward 5 Budget Forum. As attendees come in, I'll ask if you can just drop where you're calling in or viewing from in the ward. So share your neighborhood, and we'll give other guests about another minute before we get started. Thank you, Commissioners. Good to see you. So again, use the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from in the ward as we wait for a few more of our neighbors to join us. See Ivy City and Brookland and Eckington and West Woodridge. Keep it coming. While we wait about another minute, please also feel free to log into Mentimeter. We will be using that to help facilitate today's session. You can join via menti.com. That's MENTI.com. And you can use code 4996-4370. A member of my team will drop that in the chat. But you should have also received that information. Awesome. For the sake of time, we're going to get started with tonight's session because there's a lot for us to cover. No worries, there's still time for you to log into Mentimeter. You can use the QR code on the screen, or again, you can go to menti.com using the code for tonight's session 4996-4370. You can use the QR code or visit menti.com on your computer, your phone. I would recommend using your phone if you're using your computer and using code 4996-4370. I want to formally welcome you to this year's Ward 5 Budget Forum. I'm Councilmember Zachary Parker, and I'm thrilled for this opportunity to gather again amongst neighbors, both to hear about your concerns for our community, but how we can shape this next year's budget. Like the last few years, this year's budget will be unique. We are all watching the actions of Congress, but there are any number of financial headwinds facing the district, and we'll talk about that a little bit tonight, which will inform how we divide up our growing nearly $22 billion budget. Your input and that we will take from tonight's session and the input you provide over the next few weeks will help inform how we go to bat, what we advocate for, how we make trade-offs and decisions, both in the council, but also via our committee's work. Here's our agenda for tonight's session. After this very brief welcome, we'll have an icebreaker led by our Deputy Chief of Staff, Connor Shaw. We'll highlight some of those challenges I was alluding to for fiscal year 27's budget process. We will have our very capable budget office team members to walk us through the council budget process. And then we'll jump right into what your priorities are. For those that may have challenges with Mentimeter, no worries. Feel free to use the chat or flag if there's a way that we can assist. Mentimeter is a way for us to capture the information so that we can come back to it after the session, but it's also an opportunity for us to have interactive engagement throughout tonight's session. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Connor to walk us through our introductory icebreakers.
Thank you, Councilmember, and good evening, everyone. As Councilmember Parker said, I'm Connor Shaw, and I am his Deputy Chief of Staff. Our icebreakers are a way of getting to know who's in the room, but also a way to get folks comfortable with Mentimeter so that when we get to some of our more budget-related questions later on, we can make sure that we get your feedback, and it will display live on the screen. So you can use the QR code that's in the corner of the screen on your phone to find that link. You can also go to menti.com and use the code 4996 4370 4996 4370. And our first question, which will show up on your phone or in that browser tab, is just where in Ward 5 do you live? And as you can see, when we get answers from you, they will appear in real time on our presentation. We're seeing all the corners of the ward, which is great. Brooklyn, Driggs Park, Woodridge, Stronghold, Ivy City and Eckington, ANC 5B. Great. And we'll move on to the next slide. How long have you lived in the district? Under 5 years, 5 to 15 years, 15 to 25, basically my whole life. If I gave my phone to my son, he'd probably want to answer both under 5 years and basically my whole life. That's great to see. We have a lot of longtime district residents in the room. All right, next slide, please. And last of our icebreakers, what are you hoping to get out of today's meeting? Understand the budget process, advocate for specific investments, learn about my neighbors' concerns, and help shape my council members' priorities. And as you can see, the format of our questions will change a little bit depending on the questions we're asking. Sometimes it will ask you to rank choices. Sometimes we'll just be looking for an open-ended response, and you can type that into your phone or on your browser, and we'll capture your input that way. Yeah, it looks like most of the people who have answers so far are here to learn about their neighbors' concerns, which is great. All right, I will pass it back to Councilmember Parker, who's going to walk us through some of the high-level challenges and opportunities in the upcoming budget.
Thank you, Connor. And I'm really excited to dig in with you all. I want to lay some context for the discussion tonight, but also context that will shape the work of the council moving forward. There are any number of challenges confronting the district as we go through the budget process year to year. But this year it will be unique. One of the reasons why is, again, congressional interference. As I mentioned, there is congressional action taking place as we are meeting tonight on whether or not the Senate will uphold a disapproval resolution sent over by the House to undermine local district tax policy. Not to get way in the weeds, but you know that the council voted to decouple our local tax policy from what some call the big beautiful bill that the Congress passed and the president signed into law. That allowed us nearly $700 million over our financial plan to reinvest into our programs and services that we saw fit to meet the needs of our residents. I was really proud to lead the charge to establish a child tax credit as a result. and expand the earned income tax credit. Well, Congress is meddling in district affairs again and is moving to disapprove of that action. As you know, all of our local actions are under congressional review for a period of time. And it seems as though the Congress is on track to, in fact, overturn this. Why does this matter? Because this will eliminate the child tax credit that we fought so hard to establish. It will turn back the expansion for the earned income tax credit that we fought to provide for working families. It will also mean that we revert back to those tax provisions included in that big, beautiful bill. But it will also have a direct impact on our tax season. As many of you know, it's tax season now. And because this is happening, our CFO has signaled that our local tax collections can be disrupted anywhere from 4 to 5 months. And there will be many more next steps. The headline is that chaos will likely ensue, and that will undoubtedly shape our budgetary decisions and processes. So much more to come on that. One of the things I wanted to frame for you now, just as we get started, is how should the mayor and council respond to continued congressional interference? You recall last year, it was the $1 billion because of congressional action that was taken from our budget. And there are different ways of thinking about this. Some say, hey, let's not cause too much commotion and let's concede defeat on these issues and allow Congress to do what they will. There are others that say we need to push back, raise our voices, and make clear the impact of these interferences on our local affairs. And so this question is just meant to gauge your temperature on how we should approach this as a government. Next slide. And I see in the comments as well, people are saying push back. I do want to be clear, there are limits to our ability to push back, but I do want to also acknowledge the work of organizations like Free DC and others that have been mobilizing on the Hill, our shadow representatives who have been meeting and huddling. This has been a whole of government approach. And we see yet again this pattern of undermining our local autonomy. And I agree with you, there is more that we can do to be pushing back. We had a breakfast, and when I say we, the council had a breakfast with the mayor yesterday, where we discussed some of the financial pressures confronting the district and that will inform our budgetary processes for fiscal year 2027. The mayor signaled in that discussion that there will likely be many more cuts to come this year, as we've seen over the last few years in her proposed budgets. Cuts likely to school budgets, notably to the district-funded healthcare programs like Medicaid and Alliance. I think it's worth noting that it seemed as though the Alliance program could be all but zeroed out, which would be devastating for so many of our residents that depend on that. And a program in particular was highlighted, the Child Care Subsidy Program that provides subsidies for individuals making up to 300% of the federal poverty level to provide child care. The headline here is that there are proposed cuts, namely to the Health and Human Services cluster. And one of the graphics that you are seeing on the slide to just paint the impact is that if we were to maintain all of the level of spending that was passed during the fiscal year 26 budget and in the fiscal year 27 budget, as well as account for the natural rise in costs, that would mean we would have a gap of more than $1 billion. Put differently, we need to find $1 billion just even to maintain the status quo. Now, there are different approaches and perspectives, and this leads to a question that we will pose to you. How do we make up that gap? Some might say increase taxes. Some may say cut back programs. Some may say cut back government itself. And so that leads to this question here on the next slide. which I believe is where in the district's budget do you support reducing spending? This is intended to be an open-ended question intentionally to help inform us where we might be able to find savings. I see overtime. It is worth noting overtime, agency overtime spending has been an issue of focus for several years. In fiscal year 24, in fact, the auditor identified that overtime cost the district more than $300 million. In that same discussion with the mayor yesterday, it was identified that the proposed overtime spending for the fiscal year 27 season will be nearly $200 million. And so that is noteworthy. Raise taxes and get it over with. DDOT, MPD, raise taxes on the highest income brackets in big businesses, parking enforcement, salaries, the mayor's office, parking, police. And so these ideas, keep them coming. But obviously, there is a need for us to address that gap that I alluded to. The question is, how do we do it? The mayor is signaling that her approach will be to cut back health care provided to our residents, namely our most vulnerable residents that rely on Alliance and Medicaid, as well as families that rely on the child care subsidy. And I want to get the temperature of where do our neighbors think we should look to find bloat. This is really helpful. I would say one thing, and not to get too political here, but just factually, we spend more than $500 million on our police department. And we have fully funded our police department. We have provided, and when I say we, the council has fully funded our police department every year. We have satisfied the requests that the mayor has made for the agency. But I think it is worth noting and pointing out that that agency alone accounts for such a large amount of money. So do our schools. And as I alluded to earlier, the mayor's suggesting, we don't know where she will ultimately land, but it seemed like yesterday's breakfast, she was suggesting there will be cuts to schools as well. Photo ticket enforcement. That too is a controversial topic. And you may recall that a few years ago, the revenue from our automated cameras were included in our general fund. Put differently, the revenue from those cameras are part of our bottom line. So if we were to cut back the enforcement, that would mean we would have to plug that gap, frankly. Now, again, trying to be as factual as possible without getting too in the weeds. It is worth pointing out that traffic fatalities are down, and I'll just leave it there. And so we are seeing progress on that front. But thank you all for weighing in here. Another related topic is around tax policy. As I mentioned, Congress is taking action to overturn our local tax policy. And several states, including Minnesota, Washington, New Mexico, Maryland, and others, have closed budget deficits similar to the ones that the district is facing by increasing taxes on various neighbors or residents within their states. Maryland, for instance, increased the rate of income taxes for high income earners, while Minnesota increased their payroll tax and capital gains tax. I think it's worth noting last year, I put forth a proposal that would raise the surcharge on the very wealthiest individuals in the district, targeting capital gains, and that was unsuccessful. So on general tax policy, our question here is, what is your view of how we should be approaching taxes? Do you support increasing taxes on wealth to prevent cuts to critical services like Medicaid and the Alliance? or on like the child care subsidy that I alluded to. Thank you for your feedback here. I think it's worth noting, just to be fair, that often when we talk about raising taxes, I think that's often framed in a blanket way, like, let's not raise taxes. It is often said that DC has a pretty progressive tax code. In other words, those with more tend to pay more than those with less. But there are still ways in the higher levels of our tax code that it could be even more progressive, meaning the wealthiest among us are paying their fair share. One last thing I will just say factually that we were pointing out in our proposal last year is that for the very wealthy, they are gaining a significant amount of income and wealth that goes untaxed generally. And what we were trying to do was capture some of that through the proposed surcharge capital gains. But generally, here it seems as though residents would be in favor of increasing taxes on wealth to prevent cuts to critical services. Awesome. And I don't need to tell you all, many residents are struggling, and that doesn't just mean low income residents, although that certainly includes them. But I think it's fair to say, on average, these are tough times for folks in the district, but also across the country. It is more expensive to live. It is more expensive to afford housing, to put food on the table. The costs of basic goods are higher than they were last year at this time. And I think everyone is feeling the pinch. As you can see here in some of these headlines, nearly 1 in 3 Black children in DC live in poverty. And it is worth noting, poverty is a metric that unfortunately is on the rise in the district. Some of my colleagues and I, through policy, have tried to target that. That was, again, one of the reasons why I advanced the child tax credit to, in fact, counter poverty. Independent researchers suggested that that policy alone could reduce citywide generational and youth poverty by up to 25%, which would be significant. And it is something that, for me, is a North Star for my team. This idea of how do we just make it easier to survive and live in this city. As I mentioned at the outset, I led the charge last year to establish a child tax credit and expand the earned income tax credit, which benefits low income residents. And so our question here is, do you support maintaining these types of tax cuts? And I fully believe that we need to provide support to residents across income spectrums. Those two proposals in particular targeted residents making less than $90,000. The reason for that, not to belabor the point, is that the federal government too passed a child tax credit. The interesting fact, though, is that if you made about $100,000 or more, you likely benefited much more from that federal child tax credit. And if you made less than, let's say, $90,000 or closer to low or no income, you were zeroed out of that benefit. And so that is why we targeted our local child tax credit to benefit or to balance the benefits from that federal tax policy. But generally speaking, do you support tax cuts for residents making less than $90,000? And I see there are a number of folks that are saying, tell me more. What we can do and will do is follow up with more information in our newsletter. If you are not subscribed, I highly encourage you to log on. We send out information, a wealth of information every week. And we'll be happy to provide more context in this week's newsletter about some of our efforts and how it relates to the current congressional action. Here, I wanted to share that your being here, your feedback matters. I think sometimes what I hear from residents is it can feel as though the functions of government are more performatory or performative. And I just want you to know that we really pride ourselves in centering your feedback, both in our oversight, but also in how we're going to bat. You'll see at the top what we heard in our 2024 survey responses and the budget wins that resulted, including a partial child tax credit, support and expanded funding for the Fort Lincoln Rec Center, making sure we establish safe passage routes and programs around Brooklyn Metro and the Fort Totten Metro. Last year, we heard feedback around increased bike infrastructure and road safety, a need to expand support and funding for our rec centers and schools, grocery stores, and even support for funding I-83. There were a number of investments in the MBT. We expanded investments in Langdon. As I mentioned, there was a tax abatement for McMillan. And as you all know, I-83 was partially funded. Your feedback helps serve as a guiding post for me to know where we should go to bat and how we should make trade-offs. One thing I would say, we know we have roughly 60 or so residents on right now. This is not the only opportunity. This is a start to this conversation, and it is an important forum. But your resolutions, if you're a commissioner or ANC or civic association and pass those, your emails to us, all of it matters. And so I would just invite you to lean in and invite you to participate in the ongoing oversight and budget oversight hearings that are underway or soon will be underway. And with that,
thanks, Councilmember. For the next section, we are joined by our council budget office. We have Jen Budoff, who's the council's budget director, and Ann Phelps, who serves as budget counsel and also chief of staff. And they're going to walk us through a little bit about the council budget process. There will be time for Q&A on their segment at the end of their slides. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So I'm going to introduce what is the budget. We talk about it all the time as if it's something we can wrap our hands around. And so the budget is what our spending plan is for the fiscal year, which starts October 1 and ends September 30th. And it details how much we spend on our programs, on our agencies, and what the source of those funds are. Now, the budget itself is comprised of several pieces of legislation. The first one is the Local Budget Act. It has the top level number really for all the agencies, and it is supported by 5 volumes of data, but that data is only really 2 layers deep. There's quite a bit more underneath that, but those are the published volumes, which you can find online on the CFO's website. The budget also includes the Budget Support Act, which is it's the bill that looks most like legislation because it is all kinds of individual bills and budget-related changes to our code. Then there's a bill called the Federal Portion Budget Request Act, and that's where we ask Congress for certain payments, federal payments that are exclusive to the district. That doesn't include things like Medicaid or formula spending that every state gets by the nature of being a state. It's very specific things to fund things that the Congress has established for us at one time or another. And then the last piece of legislation is what we refer to as the supplemental budget, and it adjusts the current fiscal year. So the budget that we're going to be looking at come April will be for fiscal year 27, which starts October 1, but we'll also get a supplemental budget to address fiscal year 26, which we're in right now and will end on September 30th. That's sort of the big picture. What is a budget?
Thank you, Anne. Again, hello, everyone. Jen Budoff, I'm the council's budget director, and I'm going to provide an overview of what we actually spend our money on, what all of those pieces of legislation give us the authority to spend district funds on. Now, there are two types of spending that we have in our budget. There's our operating budget and there's our capital budget. What's the operating budget? The operating budget is the funds that keep the government moving. It's the salaries, it's the pencils, it's grants, it's subsidies, it's all of the daily expenses to keep the government running. And that is that all of the funds that the district uses, local funds, federal funds, $22 billion. It's a lot of money, $22 billion. On the other side of the ledger, we have our capital budget. And our capital budget is our investments in our long-term investments, our investments in durable goods. So all of the district's fire trucks actually are in the capital budget. It's also all of our roads, our libraries, our schools, all of those things that are items that you know last a longer period of time. And right now we spend about $2.5 billion a year on our capital budget. Next slide. So where do we spend our operating budget? You know, a third of our budget goes to human support services. What's human support services? That's Medicaid, that's healthcare, that's the Alliance, it's behavioral health services, it's TANF, it's homeless services, all of those types of expenditures. And by far, healthcare, Medicaid is the largest portion of human support services. And this is a third of our budget. The next largest portion is are our schools, and that's 20% of our operating budget. So that's our public schools, our traditional public schools, and our charter schools. Both have budgets of over $1 billion. There's the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, which is sort of the state education agency that runs a lot of the grants, and they run our child care programs, after school programs, things like that. So these two items together are over 50% of our budget. And then the remainder, public safety and justice, cops, fire, grants for domestic violence, things like that. That's $2 billion. Operations and infrastructure. This is, you know, our Department of Public Works, Department of Transportation, items like that. The financing and other is primarily the debt service that we have to pay on the bonds that we issue to pay for our capital budget. And, you know, government direction and support, that's really the government's operations. Economic development and regulation, that's, you know, the Department of Buildings, permitting, departments like that. Next slide. And then the capital budget, our $2.5 billion capital budget. 40% of the district's capital budget goes to infrastructure, goes to our roads, bridges, tunnels, metro, those types of very large, very important, what you really think of when you think of like infrastructure and capital. The next 30% is for our schools. You know, we all know, we look around the ward, we look around our neighborhoods, you know, most of our schools have been rebuilt. In fact, you know, a lot now, some of the schools that were rebuilt at the beginning of our school modernization process are now being renovated again. So it's our schools, libraries, those types of facilities. And then, you know, the capital budget, the remainder, public safety and justice, those are, you know, our ambulances and fire trucks and fire stations and those types of things. Human support services, a lot of that are public, excuse me, the shelters that we've built throughout the city. And you know, economic development and regulation, that is some of the subsidies that we've provided to the sports facilities throughout the district. We actually own those facilities. So we own the Nationals ballpark. We now own Capital One Arena. And even though it's not reflected in here and it won't be reflected in our capital budget for a few years, we will own the stadium at RFK too. And that's really where our $2.5 billion goes. From year to year, the buckets really don't change. You know, we're always going to spend around 40% on infrastructure. We're always going to spend around 25 or 30% on public education. It's really what the discrete projects are within those buckets.
Sorry, I lost where my mouse was. So, we're talking about the budget, which only happens during a discrete period of time, right? The spending and the revenues come in all year round, but we work on the budget for just 70 days. But the council is a legislature 12 months of the year. It's a full-time legislature, and so all throughout the year, the council is passing different bills, and sometimes bills have a cost. Maybe it's a new program that will require new employees to run, or the bill requires a new computer system, or it requires us to deliver some new service that we don't deliver now. Those things cost money, and so those bills are passed subject to appropriation, subject to funding. So we might have a whole series of bills that the council has passed throughout the year that they then try to fund during the budget process. So you may see bills getting passed. They become effective after they go through congressional review, assuming we don't have congressional interference. And then, but they don't become applicable until they're funded. But you'll see every year in the Budget Support Act, we'll have a section of repealing subject to appropriation clauses so that those bills can go into effect because the members have funded them. Councilmember Parker, for instance, funded a number of bills last year. They're not on this slide, and I can't tell you the names off the top of my head, but I know I repealed S2As for 2 or 3 bills that he had passed throughout the course of the year. So this is something that members pay attention to, because remember, a full-time legislature 12 months of the year, but only 10 weeks with the budget. That's the only time we can move money to fund new programs. And next slide is just an overview of the budget process. So like I said, it's the law says we have 70 days from the time the mayor transmits the budget till the time it's approved, and the approval takes 2 votes 2 weeks apart. So we really do the bulk of our work in 56 days. The budget is due April 1st. Then it will be broken up in pieces to the different council committees. Each committee has the ability to modify the agency budgets in their jurisdiction. Once the committees have marked up their recommendations, those recommendations all go to the chairman, and the budget office works with each committee as they do their process. And then we pivot to the chairman during the time that he has them all. We consolidate all of those recommendations from all the committees. And then the chairman makes additional decisions to meet some of the priorities that the members weren't able to fund individually. From there, we have 2 budget votes. And as the slide says, and that includes opportunities to amend, and there are amendments during the budget process. After the 2 votes, it goes to the mayor for her required 10-day review. And once that review is finalized, we send the bill to Congress for its passive, hopefully passive review process.
And I can jump in here. In addition to joining us tonight, and thank you for being here, there are a lot of ways to shape the budget. One of them is to start early, and folks really may not realize that the mayor and her agencies start their budget process actually last fall, and they are already in the process of figuring out what they will be proposing to the council. We encourage folks to be in touch with them about your priorities as well. There are also 12 other offices in the building, and while we like to think we do a good job of lifting up the needs of Ward 5 residents, we also encourage you to talk to the chairs of committees that have jurisdiction over our schools, our transportation agencies, our rec centers, because they also wield influence in this process, and it's important for them to hear what Ward 5 needs directly from you. It's very helpful for any council member or office to receive requests that are direct and specific. The more that you can help us understand what it is you're asking for, the easier it will be for us to try to make that happen. But at the same time, don't stress too much about making the perfect the enemy of the good. It's better for us to hear from you in whatever form you're comfortable with, whenever you can do it. It doesn't have to be perfect to be effective, and we love, we love when we can join you in making something happen. So with that, we're going to stop for questions at this point, and you're welcome to put those into Mentimeter or to use the Q&A function on Zoom, and I'm happy to help moderate either one. And we're going to focus right now on process questions or questions for the council budget office. We'll have a longer Q&A at the end that will be more about substantive budget issues. So I see one in the chat. Who oversees ABCA and how are they funded?
So ABCA is funded through a combination of just general local dollars, local tax dollars, and from special purpose revenue funds, which are, the licensing fees and permitting fees and renewal fees that their licensees, alcohol distributors, the cannabis pay to the district. I don't remember
It's
who
in
ABCA now.
It's in Councilmember Nadeau's committee. We recently had some shuffling of committee assignments, and that's currently in Councilmember Nadeau's committee on Public Works and Operations.
Thanks. And then in the Q&A, we have a question. Does each council member have portals for budget requests, or is that best done through email? I can take a stab at that. Email is great. If you're going to email council members, I always encourage you to CC staff, because as you might imagine, council members' email boxes receive a lot of attention, and it's just helpful for us to have multiple eyes on those. There are offices that put out budget surveys or hold forums like we are right now, and we can try to lift those up to the extent we can. But council members, I think across the board, have their own websites and social media accounts, and those should be the best ways to look for those sorts of ways to engage on the budget.
And I'll jump in also here to simply encourage again for you to lean into the council's budget oversight processes. Yes, reach out to your council office of choice, but getting your feedback on the record is also very important. You can sign up to testify in person or virtually. You can submit written testimony, and then your requests or feedback is part of the district's official record on that matter. And so we are currently in oversight season for agencies. You can share that feedback now, but it would be more appropriate for budget oversight season, which will likely kick off in March or April.
And then we'll take a couple more. I saw a question from Shanice. How is $23 billion not enough? Any volunteers to take that one?
That's a great question for Jen. I'm totally joking. I could take a stab, and then Jen can maybe talk about how the budget grows year to year and what are some of the factors that may cause it to grow from year to year. The headline here is everything we do in the budget is a trade-off, and it is a choice. And part of one of the reason we asked the question earlier on about cutting in our health and human services sector, yes, that is, if not the largest, one of the largest sectors that we fund as a government. It's about where else could we consider cutting. And so I don't know if there's a necessarily right answer to that, but we endeavor to continue to meet the needs of all 700,000+ district residents, and your feedback helps us do that. Jen, can you speak to how our budget grows year to year?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, 22 billion operating and another 2.5 billion in capital is a breathtaking amount of money. I've had this job for 15 years, and it was, a lot less when I started. But as we see, sort of with our lives is the cost of providing government services continues to go up. And right now, which is, something new for the district, the cost of providing government services is increasing more rapidly than the district's revenues. So we have this gap that's getting larger and larger every year. So, our revenues, over the past 10 years, growing 6-7% a year, tremendous growth with tremendous opportunities to invest in programs, to help district residents. We also did a lot of tax cuts 10 years ago. And we created the earned income tax credit and lots of other things. We gave a lot of money back to district residents. But we have a situation where, revenues, growing at maybe 2%, but we have something like healthcare, which is the largest sector in the district's government, and that's growing by at least 6% a year. So we have this sort of like gap that's increasing, and even though our revenues are going up, they're not going up enough to pay for the amount of government services that we are currently providing today. So we have to either make cuts to align our expenditures with the revenues that are coming in, or we have to look for new revenues.
Thank you. And then one more for Mentimeter. Which agency proposes the capital budget for DCPS and which council committee oversees it?
Sure. So the DCPS proposes their capital budget. However, it is implemented by the Department of General Services, and they are basically the district's, the agency that does all the district's building. And it is overseen by the Committee of the Whole, which all council members, nope, didn't sneeze. All council members have a seat on the Committee of the Whole, but it's chaired by Chairman Mendelson.
Great. And we're going to stop there for the sake of time, but we really appreciate Jen and Ann joining us this evening. The Council Budget Office maintains its own website with a lot of great resources. The link to that is in our slide deck, which we'll be sharing in our newsletter. and we do hope that folks reach out to them if they have any questions. But again, thank you, Ann and Jen, for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Bye. Have a good evening.
Great. We're going to move on to our last section of our agenda this evening, which is to get some more detailed input from you on the fiscal year 27 budget. And again, we'll be using Mentimeter, but you're welcome to answer these questions in the chat if that's not working for you. So our first question is, what district programs, agencies, or resources have had the greatest positive impact on you, your family, and your neighbors? And we ask this question because in budgets, it's important to be thinking about what parts of our government are working, and especially if we're in an environment where cuts are being proposed, we know there are also important services and programs that are working well, and we do need to protect from disruption. I'm seeing DPR and rec centers, DC Public Schools, public transit, and WMATA, the compost program that has recently been launched and expanded, DC TANF, which is temporary assistance for needy families. In the chat, I see senior programs, health department and DACL, which is the Department of Agency and Aging and Community Living, libraries, child care vouchers, the State Board of Education, the DMV, the homestead deduction. It's great to see a lot of things that folks find valuable in our government. It's part of what our 23 billion pays for. All right, next slide, please. So this is directed at our Ward 5 facilities, and this is, part of our capital budget every year. We take a look at what renovations or modernizations or even small capital projects are slated for our Ward 5 schools and rec centers and other facilities. And we'd like to hear from you about which ones you think could use more investment. I'm seeing rec centers on the list: Terry Thomas, Carmel in Ivy City, the Maryland Avenue entrance to the National Arboretum, Langdon ES and DCPS more broadly, Turkey Thicket Rec Center, Langdon Park Rec Center, Joe Cole Recreation Center in Trinidad. Seems like almost every rec center in the ward has gotten a mention. Brentwood, Langdon. Next slide, please. So this is the converse of the first question we asked. Which district programs or services have frustrated you or seemed wasteful or seem like a low return on our investment? Frustrations about snow removal. DDOT, DOES, bike lanes on 17th Street, the streetcar, DGS frustrating on both DCPS and DPR. The Department of Buildings. A comment that we should have kept the circulator bus. Thank you for that feedback. Our next question is, how can we better support seniors through our budget? All right, I'm seeing some answers coming in. Housing, affordable housing and healthcare, increased metro access rides, more support for our Department of Aging and Community Living, bridging the digital divide, memory care facilities, legal support services, strengthening the homestead benefit, sending mailers with info. I will take point of privilege now to say that we do publish a physical senior newsletter that we distribute every quarter. And if you'd like to get on that list, please get in touch with our office. Melissa has a list of addresses that we mail those newsletters to, and we also distribute them regularly through our constituent services team. A few more answers here. Water bill assistance for seniors, seniors farmers market, a senior cooking channel on DCTV, utility assistance. A lot of great ideas there. Thank you. All right, for our next question, this is a slightly different format. We're asking how the district could better support Ward 5's main streets and local businesses. We know that downtown gets a lot of attention in citywide conversations, but we know that some of our Ward 5 main streets and retailers need some love too. And we're asking, which of these options you support as we look to lift up their needs. So you'll see as more people answer, these lines will reflect the average of how different folks are weighing them. So ideas that have a higher score and are farther to the right have more widespread support. Those that are in the middle are sort of mixed, and those that are closer to the left have less support. And so far, litter collection and making streets more walkable and safe are two of the ideas that get among the most support. And then creating more incentives for landlords to rent vacant spaces and funding more cultural activations are right behind it. All right, next slide. Okay, another open-ended question. How can we better support district youth through our budget? some answers coming in. The Youth Summer Employment Program, bolstering the wage for the summer employment program. Again, I'll take a point of privilege to say that Councilmember Parker introduced a bill 2 years ago to do exactly that. We're still working on moving it forward and love your support. Enforcing truancy, support schools and recreation centers and programs, DPR programming more generally, school year employment opportunities or apprenticeship ops. A lot of agreement here on the things that youth need more of. Recreational opportunities, job opportunities, additional education programs, the child tax credit. Library programs and after-school programs. In the chat, I'm seeing from Commissioner Lucio, we provide activities that we adults think they want. We should include tweens and teens in the decisions and ask them what they want. A few specific ideas. Youth programs in schools, dancing on Fridays, a youth budget forum, ask youth for their engagement. Thank you, a lot of great ideas. All right, we're gonna do one more that asks for how much you agree. For each of these categories, we're asking you to indicate whether you agree that the district gets value out of their money, gets value out of its money, whether it's our public school system, direct services like housing, healthcare, and food supports, MPD and violence prevention agencies, WMATA and DDOT, our transportation agencies, the Department of General Services, which is, again, is the agency that builds and maintains most district properties. And so again, scores that are farther to the right or higher are areas where folks think we're getting value for money out of these sectors of our government. If it's farther to the left, we think there's less value for money. Currently, the higher scoring ones are our education and transportation and direct services clusters, public safety, and building maintenance score lower. And then we have 2 more slides to get your direct feedback before we open it up to questions. So you're welcome to start thinking about those substantive questions you have for the council member. But first, we've heard from residents that there is some dissatisfaction with DPR's plans for a couple of our rec centers, for Langdon and Harry Thomas. And we're asking about 2 approaches to that problem. One is get these projects finished as quickly as we can, even if the designs are less than ideal. The alternative is to fight for more funds and better designs, even if it means that those projects may take a little longer to get to the finish line. And last direct question from us is just, and this is in I'm reading on behalf of Councilmember Parker here, but where should our team focus its energy? Oversight of executive agencies to improve coordination and performance, raising the economic floor for all district residents, supporting local businesses in Ward 5 Main Streets, introducing and implementing transformative legislation. And this is a ranking exercise, so as we get more responses, the answers that have the most support will rise to the top here. And now that we've had about 20 responses, it looks like oversight of executive agencies is rising to the top, but right behind it is raising the economic floor of all district residents. And with that, we will turn in the last 20 minutes or so we have to our Q&A. Give me 1 second. And Melissa, on my screen, I can't see the full list of questions, so I may need your help to scroll to the ones that we want to lift up.
I'm happy to jump in. We can just take them one by one if that's easier.
Connor, do
That's
you
great.
mean you can't see them at all, or that you want me to show each question as you read it out loud?
If you can, we can just go through these one by one, and then when you move down, I'll move with you.
Okay, so right now you can't see anything?
No, I can see. So why is the city not cutting the 1.15 billion we are expecting to pay for the Commander Stadium,
All right,
rather than trying to cut education and healthcare?
maybe I'll scroll back up to question number 1, and then we can just go from there, because this is
Great.
listed as a little bit later. Let's go back up here. Okay.
Okay. What are we doing to get reciprocity from outside DC drivers who have traffic camera tickets in DC? I'm already aware of the lawsuits against the 3 most egregious culprits.
Yeah, happy to jump in. Great question. We passed, I'm proud to say, the STEER Act, which I co-introduced with my colleagues, with Councilmember Allen taking the lead, which does many things, but it empowers our Attorney General to be able to go after egregious drivers, namely from Maryland and Virginia, who up until this point have eluded enforcement. We would need agreements from the governors of Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, other states to have an agreement with the district. We have not secured that. And so this policy has proven highly successful. And as I mentioned earlier, we've cut drastically our traffic fatalities over the last year. And so I'm really proud of that law, and there's more work that we need to do.
Great. The mayor was recently ordered to turn over the agency budget request to the council. If the mayor complies, big if, how does the council intend to use this information?
Thanks for this question. Just a little bit of context for those watching. The mayor's agencies submit proposals, for the lack of a better phrase, to the administration as the mayor presents and prepares her budget. The council has repeatedly requested these documents directly from agencies so that we can get insights about what our directors believe they need in order to effectively run their programs. What routinely happens if you are a regular at oversight seasons is that the directors of agencies come to hearings and they say, I fully support the mayor's budget. Whatever the mayor has in the budget is totally fine. And while that is their prerogative, we have requested these documents to get a better line in the sight to what directors actually think they need to run their programs. Up until this point, the executive has refused to share those documents with the council. And there is a nonprofit that sought legal action, and the courts upheld that the executive does, in fact, have to share those documents. I see the words here, big if, and I am hopeful that the executive will be in compliance with what the courts have said, that these documents need to be shared. But the headline here is the reason why the council wants this information is so that we can continue to provide effective oversight and have line in sight into what agencies truly think they need to run effectively.
We'll circle back to this question. Why are we not cutting the 1.5 billion we're expecting to pay for the Commander Stadium rather than trying to cut education and healthcare?
So as you know, last year was a significant debate around the Commander's deal, and ultimately the council voted to approve the deal, which is a multi-billion-dollar deal that will bring the Commanders back to DC. I will point out that several of my colleagues, myself included, fought desperately to improve that deal from when it first was presented to us. And I'm proud to say that one of the wins was that we secured many jobs for district residents as part of that. Given that that deal was cemented last year and there are many legal and contractual agreements, that likely will not be on the chopping block this year. But the underlying premise that you present here is whether or not we could or should be looking at other areas to cut rather than our education sector and healthcare. And I fully agree with you. While, yes, we need to make up a gap, and yes, we need to tighten our belts, I'm a believer that we should be looking to do that equitably across government. I also fairly think we should ask those with more to do more in order for us to get over this rough patch as a city.
And next question, will improving parks be funded in this budget?
The short answer is yes. Annually, we fund a number of parks as well as DPR. I don't know if you were noticed, but there was also several wins for DC parks, including in Ward 5 through the recent federal appropriations passed to keep the government open. All told, we will see deeper investments in new parks that I helped secure in our Riggs community as well as in Carver Langston. And there, we will also be fighting to maintain funding for the renovation and modernization of our schools and rec centers. And, you know, there's more to do there as the questions we asked earlier, namely for Langdon and Harry Thomas Rec. But yes, there will be funding for our parks. And our job is to fight for even more so that we can deliver state-of-the-art resources and amenities for all of our residents.
How is Ward 5's budget ranked across other wards?
We don't have a budget as a ward compared to other wards, but I think what this question might be getting at is how are the spaces and amenities in Ward 5 funded and supported compared to others? And again, I think that is why your engagement here tonight is really important, but also your engagement through the council's oversight season is vitally important. I can't stress that enough. It is really important that my colleagues hear from Ward 5 neighbors, whether it's about Carmel, whether it's about our rec centers, whether it's about investing in more streetscaping and infrastructure, whether it's about protecting investments in housing and what have you. Whatever the interest is really important that Ward 5 residents show up. But I'm proud of the wins that we have annually as a community. And I can guarantee you that we're going to go to bat this year, even though it's a tough budget year, so that we can secure the wins for Ward 5.
Since education is one of the largest expenditures, what are we doing to make the return on investment on that higher? For example, reducing truancy.
Great question. And this is a question that I think we should be asking ourselves more. We invest a great deal of money in our schools, and we're seeing progress. But I would like to see even more progress. We have made significant investments in literacy. I think we need to make more investments in math. But I ultimately think the big focus for OSSI and our district and city should be on how do we support schools to go from good to great. And when I say what I mean by that is there are unfortunately too many of our students that are going to schools that are not meeting their needs, whether that's because they have an IEP or special needs that are not being served, or because the school is just not the right fit. I think there is a greater role for us to play in supporting schools. I was proud to work with the chairman to establish or expand the OSSI School Support Division. On truancy, I'll just say very quickly, last year, we fought for investments in expanding the truancy pilot program through DHS to middle schools. And so I am hyper focused on programs that are working. And that pilot program, which is trying to connect more of our more frequently truant and absent students to direct services and case management support through DHS, is showing signs of success. And so in this year's budget, I'm hoping that we can continue to invest in that program as we, try to do right by our students. Again, I would point back to what I said earlier. The mayor hinted that our schools may see cuts. We don't know what that would mean or what the impact of that will be. But if that is an area of focus or importance to you, again, I encourage you to share your concerns and how those cuts, if they are made, should be made.
How much of the improved budget remains unspent in dollars or percent?
Great question. I will say every year we pass a balanced budget. In fact, yesterday we were reviewing the financials from the previous year, and we've had 29 consecutive years of clean audits. In terms of unspent, I can tell you we account for every dollar in our budget, although we do have any number of reserves that we fund here as a city by option or that are mandated by the federal government. Technically, those dollars are unspent and they're meant to be there for a rainy day should we fall on them. I would say other areas of dollars underspent is if an agency is funded at a certain level and that agency doesn't use all of its allotted funding. That money then rolls back into the general fund. But generally speaking, when the council receives the budget from the mayor, dollars are allotted and accounted for every year.
What has the district learned from educational improvements shown in Mississippi?
I feel like we have some educators on the call for this type of question. Mississippi, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, Mississippi as a state, which has often been referred to as having one of the lowest performing education systems in the country, has seen a significant improvement in recent years. And one of the reasons for that is their intense focus on literacy. They've doubled down on training teachers as well as ensuring that teachers are educated in what is known as the science of reading. They have also heightened their accountability to say that if a young person is not performing on grade level by the third grade, they do not automatically matriculate. And in fact, in some instances, they repeat the grade. all told, because of their investments and the work that they've done over the last few years, I think they've gone from close to 50, if not 50th in the country, to nearly 30th in the country. There's still more work to do. And so what we've learned from that is that a deep focus on literacy pays off. I'm proud of the work that the council has funded and led in funding literacy, but there is much more work to do. And I would be remiss not to acknowledge last year's state assessment showed that DC's literacy rates grew for the first time in a long time. So those investments are in fact paying off for the district.
Next question. To what extent can the council and mayor advocate for money from the federal government to cover certain programs like baby bonds?
Great question. We work hand in hand with our federal partners, namely through our Congresswoman's office. The mayor is also working directly with the federal government. And as I mentioned earlier, we secured several investments for DC parks and institutions. And so I want to shout out Congresswoman Norton and her team for their work. In terms of the baby bonds project in particular, that was a piece of legislation that was passed and funded years ago that was unfunded in last year's budget. The status of that is that it still remains unfunded. To my knowledge, there aren't any efforts to direct federal dollars to support that program. But I think it is a worthwhile investment to ensure that our young people are on the right path.
A logistical question. Is there somewhere to rewatch this presentation if someone missed a portion?
Yes. A copy of the recording as well as the readout from tonight's meeting will be shared in our weekly newsletter this Friday. You can also find it on our website at zacharyparkerward5.com after tonight's meeting.
Next question. Why did DC waste money on a streetcar system only to dissolve it in March? It was perfect for seniors.
That is a difficult question to answer. I would say that the streetcar, there are people on all sides of this issue. It was zeroed out in the mayor's budget. And what I mean by that is when the mayor presented her budget, I believe now 2 years ago, she phased out the streetcar. And that was in part because we needed to balance the budget. And so, again, I go back to these are always trade-offs and difficult decisions that need to be made. And that was one of the choices that the mayor made. Someone mentioned the streetcar to me earlier, and I will just say what they said, and I'm happy to talk more about it, but that the infrastructure around the streetcar will remain, and one day maybe we can resume the program. So I don't think the phase out should be seen as the end of that amenity if you truly believe that we should revisit it as a city.
Will the council member support passing our tax code again as a permanent measure to keep the child tax credit that you worked so hard to put in place?
I've been dogged about the child tax credit. I believe deeply that we have to support our people in the district because we have a linked fate, and I believe it's government's role to support and meet the basic needs of our people. The short answer is absolutely yes. But I'm one member of a 13-member body. We will need to build support around council to ensure that we would take that step. We are also working with partners across government, including the mayor. And I'm not yet clear whether there's an appetite for the council to push back in this way. So I fully support it. I've shared my views with the chairman and several of my colleagues. I saw the note earlier that many of you believe we need to fight back in this moment. And I think a way we can fight back as a district is to repass the measures that we think are going to deliver for our people.
And we're going to do 2 more questions before we wrap up. And for the other ones, we'll take a look at them. And in our newsletter, we can see what additional information we can provide. But the second to last question, what is being done to improve 911 services?
Yes, 911 has seen a number of improvements, namely around technology and the training that 911 workers are receiving. It was pointed out several years ago how little 911 workers are paid, some of them being paid only $40,000. And, I see our 911 workers as frontline staff and heroes. And so we have worked to increase the pay of those individuals. We have deepened investments in training and technology. And as a result, we are seeing improvements at 911. There's still more work, but the days of sitting on hold for minutes seem to be behind us. And there seems to be less angst about errors coming from this vital agency.
Great. And then last question for tonight. Could we have an active Ward 5 working group that works in tandem with your staff on budget priorities, given that you have become an innovator on successfully shifting budget priorities?
I'm sure my staff will get a little heartburn if I commit to another working group. But the short answer is I would love to do something like that. Let us think through, and I mean this, let us think through what that can look like. I will share that we are in the process of working to stand something up as it relates to Rhode Island Avenue. As you know, that has been a focus to revitalize that corridor. We are also looking at 12th Street and North Capitol as other corridors. Just yesterday, we had a roundup focused on businesses in Ivy City. A key focus is around how do we deepen our investments in our communities and our corridors. And we're working right now to stand up a working group around that. Perhaps there is a way that we can dovetail to focus on a more general working group. So I don't know who asked this question, but if you could drop, if you feel comfortable doing so, something in the chat, I'm happy for us to follow up with you to brainstorm what this could look like. And I will just, if that's going to be our last question, end by saying thank you. I know there's a lot going on in life and in the district tonight. Just to give you a status update, it did seem as though procedurally the vote was approved to move that disapproval resolution. The actual final vote will be tomorrow. But that just goes to show how dynamic these things are. Even still, we thank you for spending this time with us to share more about your priorities and how we can invest the district's resources. I want to thank team members Jen Budoff and Ann Phelps from the council's budget office. They are top tier, best of the best. And so shout out to them. I want to thank my team for working on this with me tonight, Connor Shaw and Melissa Littlepage. Also shout out to Melissa, for she is the one that drives a lot of our communications work. I saw the shout outs in the chat. So all the shout out and love to Melissa for her work there. And on the screen, you'll see how you can stay in contact with my team. Visit us here in the Wilson building, emails, write us, and we are here at your service. This is the start of a conversation that will carry on for the next few months. And I again want to say thank you for joining us.